Hello lovely painter people and welcome back to the studio here in Northumberland. I'm going to be working from another one of my books today. This one came out in October I think 2019, so it wasn't the last one but it was the one before it. And as the title would suggest, it's Boats and Harbours in Watercolour. So there's a lot of water in this actual book. I'm going to do one project from it, and then what I'm going to do after that are a couple of little side paintings to show you how to do different kinds of water, especially reflection, because that's a really difficult thing for most people. It's easy. And the book is Boats and Harbours in Watercolour, like I said. What I'm going to work from is page 77, and it's just Buoys on the Beach, I think it's called. Something like that. There, that's the one I'm working from, and that's what I'm going to do. I might change it a little bit because I don't like doing paintings twice. But this book is really useful because you've got all the tracings of all the paintings that I did in the book. So you can either use those tracings to put on your paper, or you can just use them to have a look at as a reference point to do your drawing. Really useful little thing that. I don't know what that window's for, but it's good. So what I'm going to do, start off with a simple drawing, and as I said, it's more or less that painting. So I want a line just above half. It's amazing, loads of people bang on about rule of thirds, because rule of thirds is really important for your horizon line, either third way from the top or third up from the bottom or whatever. It's not that important. Don't listen to what you hear about rule of thirds. Either slightly above half or slightly below half will do, as long as you're not splitting your picture in half by having that bang in the middle. Well, there's my horizon line there. I've got a hill here, a little hill, and one slightly below, there, like so. But it's fairly hard pencil. That'll do. Time for the paint. The paints I'm going to use are De La Rowney Aquafine paints, Aquafine watercolours. These are them. And these are very inexpensive tubes of paint. I think these are about £1.80 a tube. I think that's what we sell them for on my website anyway. And I should be using very few colours in this one, but Aquafine, and strictly speaking it's students' quality paint. But these days De La Rowney have introduced natural pigment into students' quality paint. So it's a really inexpensive way of getting a good strong colour. What you've got to remember when you're putting the paint on in watercolour is as it dries, it's going to dry that much lighter than when you actually put it on. So if you want a good strong sky, then always allow for that. First of all, plenty of water. Going from the top, all the way down. Don't fiddle about with these, skies are dead easy. Don't make them more labour intensive than they need to be. Because the longer you take over your sky, the more chance you've got of making cauliflowers, which is where, or a watermark, which is where the paint starts to fluff up a little bit. That's because you're taking too long. A little bit of Ultramarine Blue. I've got the Aquafine paint squeezed out into my mixing areas here. Ultramarine Blue, plenty of water into this. What I'm going to do, slap that on, bish bash bosh, bish bash bosh, first technical term. Wash out, squeeze out, and mop it up. Now, watch how I'm washing out my brush here. I'm not trying to get all the water out of the brush, I'm just washing it out, squeeze it out once, there, it's now ready. Pop it on, take some clouds out. And again, wash out, squeeze out, mop up. I've got a bit of green stuff on my brush there. Wash out, squeeze out. Just taking out. If I want a cloud shadow, in those clouds. As I'm taking out there, just pop a bit back in there. Look. Such an easy way of doing it. Don't fiddle about with your kitchen roll. The kitchen roll will suck the paint out all the way down to the paper, leaving you with a big hard white blob on a sharp edge. This is far more natural. You've got a little bit of the underlying colour still in there. Taking out again, look, there. Bit of cloud shadow, pop it back down there. So simple. And now just let that dry, and then I can go into the hills. Now my sky is good and solidly dry. And can you see how much lighter it's dried to the blue bit than when I put it on? Always that much lighter. Probably about 30% lighter than when you put it on. What I'm going to do now is the hills. And I've changed my 3/4 inch wash brush. The brushes I use are all, again, Dale Rowney. Everything I use is Dale Rowney. These are the Aquafine range. Aquafine paints, which I'm using, and Aquafine brushes. There you go. It says on Aquafine. That's how I know. I've even got Charles Evans written on my smock. That's just so I can remember who I am. I used to wake up in hotel rooms and think, where am I? Now I wake up these days and think, where am I? Now, 3/4 inch flat wash brush, 1.5 inch flat wash brush, number 8 round, and a number 4 rigger. And those are all the brushes I use. And I also use the same brushes for my acrylics. You can get System 3 brushes, which are really good brushes. But quite often when I'm on the road, I'm doing both mediums. And it's far less confusing to use the same set of brushes for everything. Really useful brushes. But this time, it's my 3/4 inch wash brush. And all I'm doing, I've got a little bit of yellow ochre, plenty of water into this, bit of yellow ochre. These are not too strong, and they're certainly not complex. I'm not fiddling about with any detail on them. Just a bit of light and shadow and dark. A little bit there. Now, wash out. I've got a little bit of burnt sienna, just a touch. A bit of that in there as well. Like so. And I haven't pre-wet the hills, but I've got plenty of water in the paint, in the mix. So it's not too strong. Now, Ultramarine Blue, a little bit of that, a little bit of alizarin crimson, plenty of water. All we need to do now is put that in there. Sharp edge at the bottom there, look. And just let the paint mingle, like merge together on the paper. It's always lovely when that happens. When you want it to happen, that is. Always a bit of a nightmare when it mingles and mixes when you don't want it to. A bit of that. Now, a touch more water into it. And a little bit of that there as well. Sharp edge again. There. So just let that little bit of yellow ochre shine through there. Bit of light on it. A little bit there, a bit there. Hey presto, distant hills. But if I wanted to give them a little bit more movement, just wash my brush out, squeeze out, take a bit of paint out, like so. A little bit there. Just revealing a little bit more light to the left hand side there, by taking paint out. People always think with watercolours that once you put a mark on, you're committed, that's it, it's got to stay, you can't change it. It's nonsense. If you want to change things, either wash it out or soften it, like I'm doing here, taking a bit of paint out. Let that dry. For the sea, I'm sticking with the same brush, my 3/4 inch flat, and this is an odd mix, very odd, but it's got to be based on the same blue as the sky. Don't start changing blues throughout a painting, not for anything natural anyway, otherwise the thing's not in harmony. A little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of hooker's green, God, it's Hocker's green. And a touch of burnt cyan. Oops. Bit more blue. And now, plenty of water into there. And all I'm doing, look, filling here. I'm leaving the tiniest little sliver of white paper showing between the hills, the base of the hills, and the water. All the way across there like so. Now, the water holding capabilities of these brushes is fabulous, even though they're not expensive brushes. I think this one is about £5, 3/4 inch flat. Well, it's about that much on my website anyway. Now, look, it's still going with the same dip of paint. As I'm going further forward, I'm starting to leave a few tiny white bits showing through. But here, that's still with the same dip of paint. And again, coming further forward, leaving a few white bits showing. Bit of the underpaper. Don't use white paint. I hate white paint. There's no finer white than the white of the paper. Still going with the same dip of paint. In fact, I've still got so much paint left in there that now I'm going to put a bit more water into that same brush full of paint. Again, coming further forward. There. And again, touch more water into that same brush full of paint. Moving forward here. Now I'm going to wash out, squeeze out, take a little bit of paint out there, put it out there. So it's not white, but it's lighter than the other bits of sea. How easy is that? Now where I've left white bits there, I'm going to go back in with the same mix, but a little bit stronger. And underneath some of the white bits, just dab on with a few darker bits, like so. That just helps give a little bit of movement to the sea, turn of a wave if you like. That. It is very, very easy. Don't get worried about watercolours. And now I'll just leave that to dry for a second. Now my sea's dried enough. It's not totally dry yet, but it's dry when I put it on. So it's time for the beachy bit. And for this, I'm going to use Charles Evans sand. There it is in my palette. This is the only one that's not on aquafine paint. This is an artist quality paint, and yes, it is opaque, but it's a very, very useful colour. Charles Evans sand. And what I'm doing, look, first of all, get plenty of water into there, and just pop it on like so. Don't try and carefully paint around those buoys. Go through them. As long as you can still see the drawing, you know where it is. That's all that counts. There. Now, the sand is a really useful colour. So many uses. It's good for beaches. It's called sand. But also, it's good as a layering colour, which is how I'm going to use it here. Put that down, and then put other colours on top. And let the sand show through in between those colours. But it's also a good lightener. Never mind painting beaches, you can put that in the sand into any other colour that you've got. It'll lighten it without muddying it like using white wood. It's good for stonework. Flesh tone is a really difficult colour to mix in watercolours. Sand, touch of light red, you've got flesh tone. It's so simple. Stonework, it's brilliant for stonework. I love it for stonework. But you just mix it with other colours. Now, whilst that's still damp, I've got a little bit of yellow ochre here. Plenty of water into that. And I just want a couple of touches of that on here. Here and there. Now, tiny touch of light red. Light red is not a red made lighter. So don't get your cadmium red and put loads of water into it and think that you've made light red. You haven't. You've made your red lighter. Light red is a colour called light red. It's actually more akin to burnt sienna. Just a couple of strokes of that. And a little bit of raw umber. Again, raw umber is the only brown I use. If I take my raw umber by itself, there it is, I've got a nice brown. If I put a touch of blue into that, I've got sepia. If I put a touch of burnt sienna into that sepia mix, I've got Van Dyke brown. If I take my raw umber and burnt sienna together, I've got burnt umber. So I've got 4 different browns from one tube. Very easy way of mixing. This is just raw umber. A couple of touches of that here. Coming in from the bottom right there, look. A few bits there. And more water into that same brush of raw umber. Put that there. Up to the sea. Now again, I need to let that dry before I paint the buoys and a little bit of shadow, and then we'll be finished with this picture. So simple. I've just been standing here watching paint dry so that you don't have to. The paper I'm using, by the way, is the Langton Rough, and it's only £140 weight, and I never ever pre-stretch watercolour paper, and the Langton will stand a lot of abuse. Despite the amount of water that I put on. Yes, there's a slight bulge here, but once I take the tape off, it will always dry out totally flat. But it will never, ever go into wiggly bits that stop you from painting. So, Langton Rough. It's not an expensive paper, but it's a really good, hard-working paper. And it's internally sized. Watercolour paper is sized to take the paint. And in a lot of watercolour papers, you kind of like flicking backwards and forwards, which is the right side. With this stuff, there's no wrong side. You can paint on both sides. So I've changed to for once now to my round brush, my number 8 round. And the buoys I'm going to paint in light red. And there we go. A very, very simple, but quite effective little painting. That didn't take too long at all. Very few colours, but it's got enough impact because of those 2 little bits there. And now they're not tomatoes. But don't switch off yet. because I'm just going to take this paper off, put another piece of paper on, and then I want to show you a couple of examples of reflections in water. Still on with water, I've got a couple of bits of messy taped on paper here. And I just want to show you a couple of examples for reflections. Now, as I said, in that book, Boats and Harbours, there's lots of different water and different ways of doing water and reflections, but this is very simplified. Look, I've got a bit of land there, and I'm going to do two together. I'm going to paint them both at the same time. So while one bit's drying, I can move across to the other one. On here, we'll have a tree. Very simple outline. I'm going to have this in full foliage, so don't start fiddling around with loads of twigs. Just stick to the main boughs. Trees behind that. And slightly above that baseline there. Line of the water there. Here I'll have my water. With a hill on it. And very importantly, a boat. About there. Sideways on, it's a very easy process with a boat. There we'll have a mast, sorry if you're from London, a mast. There, very simple little drawings. Now I shall move from one to the other. While one's drying, I'll be painting a bit more on the other one. As I said, this is about the reflection, not the rest of the painting, so I'm not really bothered about the rest of the paintings, to be honest. It's just a backdrop for the reflection. So, a little bit of water here. Don't start fiddling about and going around them, or the big tree, go through it. Now, just a little bit of blue, Ultramarine Blue, and as I said, still aquafine paints, but good strong colours these, I love them. There. Actually, I've got a bit of burnt sienna there as well. That was a happy accident. Bit there. Wash out, squeeze out, and take some cloud out. All with my 3/4 inch brush look. Mop up again. And I'm not going to stop to let anything to dry in these. So you're seeing it in real time, totally real time. While that's drying, a little bit, I'll come over here. Water. From my mucky bucket. A little bit of Ultramarine Blue again. Now, wash out, squeeze out, get rid of that bit so it doesn't drip down. Wash out, squeeze out, take them out there. Mop up. That'll do for that. Now, I'm going to change to my round brush now, because that's not dry yet, obviously. I only did it a couple of minutes ago. But it doesn't need to be. This business about bleeding up, quite often it's your enemy. If you want distance, it's your friend. A little bit of yellow ochre, because it helps you get kind of like a soft, distant, hazy effect on the top. Bit of yellow ochre, tap on. Now, Hooker's Green and Burnt Sienna. Oh God, Hooker's Green again. Remember what I always say, never use Hooker's Green by itself. As a mixer, however, it's fabulous. Put it into every other colour you've got. And you've got loads and loads of different greens, but never by itself. Hooker's Green, Burnt Sienna, just tap on, leaving little bits of the yellow ochre shine through here and there. Like so. And again, you can see it's starting to soften on the top a little bit. Nice sharp edge down here. And again, tapping. Now, strange as it may seem, a little bit of blue. Blue in your trees, you say? Yes, because if it goes on top of the green, it's not coming out bright blue. All it's doing is giving a little more depth to the green. Straight away across there, look here. Notice I've gone through that victory. Now wash out, squeeze out, and just with a clean damp brush, soften that blue into the green a little bit. So easy. Don't panic about it. Now, back to this one. Let's have a little bit of blue and light red. Ultramarine blue, touch of light red. There. Plenty of water into it. All I'm doing there is just go up to my pencil line with the 3/4 inch brush. Sharp edge down there. And that's how simply you can do distant hills. To get a little bit of shape into them, wash out, squeeze out, and take a little bit of light out with it. A bit more there. How easy is that? Now, back to that one. If I wanted light on that tree, I've painted all the way through it. Don't worry. Look, wash out, squeeze out, take paint out. Look how easy that is. Such a simple process. Now let's have a little bit of yellow ochre on here. Stronger than that. And a little bit down there. Now, Hooker's Green and yellow ochre. Bit of Hooker's Green and a lot of yellow ochre. A little water into there. And that's more of a grassy green, sorry, a grassy green. Bit of a gap between the two there. Now, a little bit of Hooker's Green and Burnt Sienna. More green there. That's your water. And just pull this down here. Like so. Now, interestingly, you'll notice that I'm painting the reflections before I paint the water. So often people paint the water and then plop the reflections in on top afterwards. And when they finish painting, it looks like the reflections have been plopped in on the top afterwards. Get those reflections in first, and then when you put the water on, that softens the reflection, makes them sit down in the water. Far more effective. Go back to this one. A little bit of my ultramarine blue and light red again. A little bit of that there. There, just by putting a bit of that blue and light red, slightly stronger underneath. So, back to this one. And I shall go to my rigger brush for that tree because it's fairly small. I've got a little bit of raw umber mixed with a touch of ultramarine blue. There. Empty of water into it. And all I'm doing with my rigger brush is have a few bits here and there. Mainly down that right hand side of the tree. Actually, I'll have a couple more boughs in here. Yeah, that's better. Now, again, straight down there. I'm painting the reflection in as I'm going along. That way, I don't have to wait for it to dry afterwards. Not for too long, anyway. I'll leave that for a second now. Go back to this one. The boat, what colour shall I have it? How about red? Bit of liver and crimson. I'll just fill that in there. And again, as I'm going along, paint the reflection in. Back to this one. A little bit of yellow ochre first, but I'm sticking with my round brush. Don't start painting loads of individual leaves. Bigger strokes. Bit of yellow ochre. What I'm doing first, with the side of my round brush, you notice I'm holding it differently. I'm not holding it like I would normally. The side of the brush. Pop it on there like so. Now, crocus green and burnt sienna. And again, with the side of the brush, tap that on, leaving a little bit of the yellow ochre showing here and there. And again, down here. Now, finally, a little bit of blue, ultramarine blue, because that's the blue of the sky. And just put a few bits of that here and there. Just get a bit of depth into the green. Back to that one, and with my rigger brush, I'm going to have ultramarine blue and burnt sienna as a black. Wash out, squeeze out. And carefully fill my mast in. Sorry, my mast in. This is when you find out that the red wine the night before is not helping. underneath the boat and a little bit at the back there. There. Now, back to this one. It's now back to my 3/4 inch brush, and it's that combination again with the first picture that I did. Ultramarine Blue, because that's the blue of your sky. I'm sorry I keep saying that, but it's really important. If I keep saying it, you'll remember it. Ultramarine Blue, alizarin crimson, sorry. Just said that wrong. Ultramarine Blue, hooker's green, and a tiny touch of burnt sienna. Plenty of water into there. And you've got to be fairly brave for this. Make sure that your reflection is dry. And if you remember, I did that one first. And then whilst that was drying, I was painting here. So it's now dry. So when you're putting this water on, you do have to be brave. Don't prevaricate or hang about. That tree is now, the reflection of the tree is good and dry. So with my brush, big broad strokes. And again, that's a mix of ultramarine blue, a tiny touch of hooker's green, and a little bit of burnt sienna. I'm just using the sharp edge of my brush now, painting through the reflection, everything. Now wash out the brush well, give a good squeeze, and with the sharp edge of the brush, just start and suck out a few little bits of light here and there. Just a few, don't go mad. Keep washing the brush out every few strokes. That way I'm taking paint out rather than just moving it around. And in the darker areas it always shows better as well. Just a few strokes. Less is best. Now, over to the other one. This is the same mix but just with more water in. Big broad strokes again, through the mast reflection and everything. Just be a little bit careful around that boat, up to the base of the boat, and then just around my mast, which of course that bit's not reflection, so I don't want to paint through there. All the way across, and a good sharp edge to the base of the hills, around the boat, and again, wash out my brush, squeeze out, and just stroke through here and there. Keep washing the brush out, squeeze out. Just that little bit there at the front of the boat. And now, just like the other one, take some strips of colour out, just for that little bit of light. Don't like the way that's spreading there. So here's another quick tip. Get rid of cauliflowers and going back in. Now, all I need to do with those is take the table. Just carefully take the table. The big reveal! And there you go, two very simple pictures with, importantly, very simple reflections in. There's so many bits and pieces in here about water and different ways of doing water, but the same with the reflections, the same way of doing it with the reflections. It's a very effective way of doing it. You can get this on my website along with everything else that I use, the Aquafine brushes, the Aquafine paint and the Langton rough paper. It's all in there. So have a look and I'll see you again soon.